Chapter 2. Thursday early morning. Early Thursday morning, Doreen sat outside on the steps of her rear deck with a fresh cup of coffee. She looked across the huge expanse of her garden, loving it, yet at the same time hating parts of it. She had a lot of work to be done here, and she never quite seemed to get there. Since she'd arrived in Kelowna after being replaced with younger arm candy, her world was not the same. She chuckled. It was, in fact, much better. She couldn't believe how much more real it was, and how much more validated and useful she felt. She was doing something with her life now. Maybe not everybody was happy with what she now did. Lovely Corporal Mac Moreau, the detective she loved to spend time with, made her feel like she was more than a pain in his ass. At the same time, though, he liked her enough to give her cooking lessons. She smiled at the thought of their last discussion. She'd basically told him that she had some information about a gun somebody had handed over, then had made it clear she wouldn't even talk to Mac for the rest of the day. The last few weeks had been brutal. She needed a day off for herself. Even a partial day off would do. Today she didn't plan to do much besides have tea, rest, and get another 10 hours of sleep like she did last night. She felt completely renewed and reinvigorated after her wonderful night. She'd settled into the house, finally. It still needed a lot of attention, but the antiques, the furniture, the books and the paintings were gone. Now she really wanted to empty out the rest of the house. Put everything in the garage or in the basement, or somewhere that would allow her to give the house a spotless cleaning from top to bottom. She wanted to make sure she got all the corners, nooks and crannies. She wanted everything found, sorted, tossed or wiped down. She harked back to the concept of a garage sale. It was either that, or maybe several dump runs. Not a whole lot remained in her house though, so maybe it would all go in one trip to the dump. But first she needed food and she needed more coffee. She yawned loudly. Muggs, who was lying by her feet on the deck, rolled over and stretched his belly to the sky, as she reached out and gave him an extra-long scratch. "You were hugely instrumental in saving my life yesterday," she said. "I can't believe how this garden is so lovely, and yet apparently so lethal." How many times had she been attacked in her own backyard now? She couldn't even remember. Should she count the newspaper reporter who had accosted her too? As far as Doreen was concerned, that was certainly one negative to her backyard. But Penny. Well, that went beyond the other assaults. But then again, Penny had attacked Doreen in her own garage. Although Penny may have been momentarily confused, because it did look like her old garage. Doreen had moved all of Penny's husband's tools and benches over, and had set it up in exactly the same layout. Wasn't that just so funny? And perfect for Doreen, as she now had a great workshop. Though she wasn't feeling like laughing about Penny now. Not when she was spreading lies about Doreen making up the whole attack story. Penny was causing trouble even from jail. If she was in jail, maybe she had made bail. Although Doreen hadn't seen any sign of Penny around town. And didn't want to if she was lying about things. Good thing Doreen had a recording of the event. But who knew she would need something like that? That she would need to legally defend herself, after she already had to physically defend herself? She was still thinking about that case. And that hadn't been the last case she'd worked on either. Doreen still gave Muggs some attention when Goliath, her adopted Maine Coon cat, walked across the deck and jumped on her shoulders. He meowed in her ear, his head rubbing along her hair. She put down her coffee cup and reached up so she could scratch his ears and rub Muggs's belly at the same time. "You were just as helpful too," she said. "I owe you guys big time." Just then a squawk came right beside her. "Thaddeus is here. Thaddeus is here." She chuckled and twisted her head ever so slightly so she could see the big African gray parrot she'd inherited from her grandmother, along with the house and Goliath. "Thaddeus," she said, "you'll have to wait a minute. These guys need some attention too." The bird turned his head and gave her a glaring look. Thaddeus is here. Thaddeus is here. Doreen sighed and had to stop rubbing Muggs's belly in order to gently stroke Thaddeus's chest feathers. And you're awesome, Thaddeus, she said with a smile. Then she laughed. How many times had they saved her life already? And who knew, with the trouble she kept getting into, how many more times they would be required to do so? She couldn't imagine life without them anymore. It reminded her of how empty and lonely her previous existence had been. Although married to a mega-wealthy businessman and hosting a lot of dinner parties and traveling with other social elites, she had been so empty inside. She hadn't even realized it until she had come here. When her phone rang, she looked at the screen and smiled as she answered. Good morning, Mac. I didn't wake you, did I? He asked. She heard the worry in his voice. That added a ray of sunshine to her day. No, I'm sitting outside on the deck with a cup of coffee, she said. I think I slept 10 hours last night. Well, thank heavens for that, he said. Now, if you would just give yourself a few more days to rest, relax, and unwind, that would be even better. You've had one of the most incredibly chaotic weeks I've ever seen. Considering all the antiques moved out of my house and Crystal's case, she said, I agree. And I have to admit to still being tired. I'm sitting here, feeling mighty peaceful, but at the same time, I don't really have the energy to get up and grab that second cup of coffee waiting for me. So, if I come over right now, I could snag it. I'm pretty sure that just as you're driving up my driveway, I'll get the energy to steal it in time. Wow, that's mean. You should probably be making me a cup of coffee. How many more cases have we closed? The final details aren't in yet, he said blandly. A couple cases in Vernon and Kamloops might connect to Crystal's case. Mary's brothers traveled all around, building up their collections of sellable items. His tone was wry. She remembered those sellable collectibles were also likely stolen in many cases. Then your B&E division should be all over this too, she said. I think the entire department is. If you're angling for a medal, don't, because that's not something we do. No, I can see that. But I just might have a little pull, if I ever need something. I hope it never comes to that, he said, because that's not something we would particularly like to acknowledge. Obviously, if you get into a spot of trouble, and it's innocent and easy to fix trouble, the guys can come and help you out. But if you're expecting to do a crime and go unpunished, no. She frowned. You know what? I don't think that's very generous. I mean, look at how many crimes I've stopped. Surely I should be allowed to commit one or two. Doreen, he said in warning. Don't you start. She laughed. See? I caught you. Mac groaned into the phone. I'm glad you're in such a great mood this morning, he said. You know that I'll have to come and take your statement today? And I have to talk to you about something else too. The gun, she said. And then she realized she wasn't ready yet. She wanted to sit in the sun, relax, and forget about outstanding cases and getting attacked by people she liked or didn't like, who may or may not have committed crimes. You're the one who just told me that I needed a week or two to rest. No, I said a day or two. Then you can come back in a day or two. Well, that'll hardly work, he said. When the gun is sitting here at the station and when I have to put it in evidence, and when some of the guys overheard you say that you knew something about it. She frowned at that. Did I really open my mouth that loud? Oh, you sure did. The guys have been chuckling since it happened because, in almost every instance, I'm having to talk to you. May have to haul you into the station this time. Why? She asked in outrage. I only said I knew something about it. I didn't tell you that it was mine. No, but considering that we are trying to match the gun with other cases, you can bet, as soon as the results come back, there'll be all kinds of chaos. Maybe not, she said. Who knows just where that gun has been? Exactly. Now, do you want to tell me over the phone, or am I coming over and stealing that coffee? You could try to steal that coffee, she said cheerfully, but it won't work. You want to bet on that? At that, she heard her kitchen door slam. She spun around, shocked. Max stood there, holding a cup of coffee in his hand with a huge grin on his face. She shut off her phone and glared at him. But Muggs, Goliath, and Thaddeus were all over him. She could hardly be mean. Besides, she was delighted to see Mac anyway. Now that was a dirty trick, she complained good-naturedly. Hardly a trick at all, he said. He reached down and rubbed Muggs's ears. You owe these guys a lot. I know, she said. It's amazing how protective and how extremely good they are at defending me. What's so strange is that they work together. It's one thing for a dog owner to have the dog defend his owner, but it's not just Muggs. It's Muggs, Goliath, and Thaddeus. It's like one takes the gun out of your attacker's hand while the other one knocks him down, and then Thaddeus walks up and down them, pecking away. I mean, it's really bizarre. Well, look at that, she said with a grin. It's almost like you were there. He chuckled. It's all good. These guys deserve animal medals. Right, and they'll get that, of course, she said, but I won't get one? Does it matter to you? He looked at her curiously. Do you need that form of appreciation? Heavens, no. The last thing I want are more reasons for the media to be all over me. You know what that was like yesterday. If you look out front right now. He gave her a fat smirk. Thaddeus took the opportunity to hop onto his shoulder and cuddle up against his neck. Max sat on the deck cross-legged, getting completely covered in dirt. He cuddled the bird. You really are lucky. I know, she said, all her humor fleeing. Thaddeus is such a cuddle bug, and I had no clue it was even possible. Then she added, what's out front? If you dare, you can peek around the corner. She shot him a dark look and sighed knowingly. It's the media, isn't it? He looked at her and said, why don't you take a look?